and we bolted the porta potty in next to the gas tank. So there was absolutely no reason for us to stop except for some mechanical failures. Okay, so in the midst of all this growth with Fantasy Coachworks and the franchising, the fantasy girl beauty pageants, the TV commercials, opening up stores everywhere, employees everywhere, custom cars everywhere, I was sitting at home on a Sunday, which is rare because we pretty much work 7 days a week, and you used to get Parade magazine inside your Sunday paper. I know that's a thing long in the past, but this little magazine would always have all kinds of interesting stories in it that were on a national level. This was late October of 1983, and I opened up Parade magazine, and on the cover of Parade magazine, it said Desperados of the Highway. And I'm like, wow, what's this about? I opened it up, and they had about a 4 or 5 page spread on the 4-ball rally, which was a race, not the typical New York to Los Angeles. This race was billed as the furthest realistic point from coast to coast. So they went from Boston, Massachusetts, down to San Diego, California. And I read about this story and the different types of cars and so on. And I like, this is tremendous. I have got to do this. Myself and several of the top guys that I worked with, we were all motocross racers. So we were used to going to the racetrack and banging bars and getting off that starting gate. And buddy, you had to be the first one to the checkered flag because second place was first loser, right? So I saw this and I thought not only was it fantastic just to participate in it, but what would happen if Fantasy Jim and his crew won the 4-ball rally? And we would add that to our list of credentials: fantasy posters, fantasy girls, TV commercials, franchise sales, entrepreneur magazines, top 500. Now we could say we were the winners of a cross-country 4-ball rally. So I thought about it for a little bit. I talked to a couple of my guys about it. Again, both my top guys, Randy Shekel, Radical Randy Shekel. He was known locally because he was the #1 motocross rider in the state of Missouri, was actually a Yamaha support rider from the factory. And he was a tremendous driver. And then my vice president in service, he was a great local motocross racer, Mike Giaffino. So the three of us had been good friends since even before the fantasy days. We raced together, and I gave them this proposal. And of course, they were all in for it, right? Anybody's in for it, they're gonna get a free ride. We looked around at what kind of vehicle could we do this in, because a lot of these guys were in Ferraris, Porsches, Panteras, different, iterations of race cars. Well, all three of us were very familiar with the vans that we had been customizing. They're an extremely versatile vehicle, and if you're not afraid to drive one, you can get a lot out of it. And of course, we were fearless. November of 1983, I contact the 4-ball rally promoter, get some information. The next race is in June of 1984, roughly 6 months from now. So we're in the middle of selling franchises. We're in the middle of getting ready for the Christmas selling season. So I come up with this harebrained idea of, hey, we're going to not only participate in this thing, but we are going to win this thing. And we're going to do it in my Dodge van that was my daily driver that I bought when it was brand new in 1980. Van had shag carpet in it, had the front spoilers and the big wing off the back and the big stereo system and so on. But it had been created as a showcase for a motocross van. And what I mean by that is all of the interior on the floors and so on, the beds and all that stuff, was all removable in a matter of 60 seconds. So you pulled all this stuff out and you had a cargo van. We knew what we would have to do. First of all, we pulled the motor. It was a 318 V8. We pulled the motor. We got a 340 high-performance motor out of an old 70 Cuda, and we sent it to Kern Racing there in St. Louis, And we said, we need a motor that's going to last for 3,000 miles wide open. We don't need a drag race motor. We don't need a road race motor. We need something that's powerful, but it has to last. So they built this motor with all kinds of mild performance parts. Then I said, well, there's a good possibility that we're going to end up off the road and roll this van. This is not the type of vehicle that handles that well in the beginning, so to speak. So I went down to the local metal shop and they built a full roll cage for the interior of the van that covered not only the drivers in the front, but then all the way through in the back. So if in case we did roll this thing, and remember guys, 1984, there's no airbags or anything like that. We thought that maybe we would at least survive, okay? But then the strategy was that we can't beat these exotics on the open road. So we're going to win with time. I had a good buddy of mine that was an ace welder, and he built a beautiful all aluminum 80-gallon fuel cell with a quick fill opening. It was a larger opening than normal, and he baffled it for us. We assume he tested it because we never tested it before we left for this rally. But anyway, so we bolted this 80-gallon fuel cell in there. We replaced the seats with some Recaro racing seats, 4 or 5-point harnesses, added some fire extinguishers, and then we knew that there'd be driver pit stops. And I said, there's no way we're going to stop. So I took a porta potty out of an RV, of course a new one. I didn't get a used one. And we bolted the porta potty in next to the gas tank. So there was absolutely no reason for us to stop except for some mechanical failures. So I tried to anticipate every possible, minor failure. We had spare parts, we had an alternator, we had a starter, we had a full set of spark plug wires, we had a full set of belts, anything at all that we thought might need to be replaced on the journey, tools and so on. So the whole idea was to go on the East Coast in Boston, be completely self-contained and never get out of that van until we had to fill up one time across country. And the calculations were, if we started with 120 gallons of fuel, we had 80 on the inside and 40 on the outside, that we would fill up one time and then make it into San Diego, maybe on fumes. That was averaging about 12 miles to the gallon. So we figured one pit stop and that was it. Of course, it didn't work out that way. In a short 6-month period, we built this van into a road warrior type of movie prop that was going to win the 4-ball rally. It was not a publicity stunt. We did not look for plan B. But like a lot of inexperienced young people that think they can do anything that they want, we failed to test anything on the van whatsoever, other than maybe a couple little local rides on the highway, because we were literally working on this thing up until the day we had to leave for the race. When you're involved in an organized race, you can't put it off a day or two or a week or a month. You got to get up there on the starting line. So we're cruising towards Boston, left out of St. Louis day before. So that's the first 1,500 miles, basically. We're cruising towards Boston, and my mechanic, Mike Chaffino, said, guys, we should really open this thing up and let's test it. I said, okay. So boom, to the floor, cruising along, and all of a sudden, boom, we hear something come flying, and it turned out that the magnetic CB radio antenna that we had on top of the van, and I mean, this thing was big. We purposely bought it, the biggest one we could buy. The thing literally blew off the van and was swinging down around by the highway on the side of the van by the coax cable. And luckily, because this was a beautiful piece of equipment, this van was, luckily it never touched the side of the van. So we had a little something going for him there. We did not have any gas in that 80-gallon fuel cell. We were simply running on the 40-gallon cell for obvious reasons. So we got to Boston and started at a Marriott hotel. We quickly ran to the local truck stop and got a pair of Hustler CB antennas that we bolted onto the mirrors, scrapped the other one. And we went to that local gas station and filled up the 40-gallon tank, topped it off, and then began to fill up the 80-gallon fuel cell. Now, my buddy Brian, who built the thing, again, he must have tested it because there was not a single leak, no pinholes, and no smell either. Because this thing sat right inside with us. It wasn't in a trunk or anything like that. So that was tremendous. And then we get to the banquet and find out that Ed Preston, which was Michael's father, he said, guys, we've only got 23 entries this year, and we don't know if we can come up with the full $10,000 prize. And what do you guys want to do? If you want me to cancel it, do you want me to give you a refund? Whatever you want to do, I'm okay with. And he was very distraught about it because if you know the backstory at all about it, his son was murdered. So he was doing this to honor his son. But anyway, the guy was so gracious, but quite frankly, we were never there for the $10,000, which in today's money would be $100,000. And I don't think anybody that was there had any reason whatsoever to care about the money. And just almost instantaneously, the entire crowd, we had like 46, 50, drivers and co-drivers there. It was like, we don't care about the money. We're racing tomorrow, So we're at this little banquet. We all had a nice meal, got to meet everybody, see all the different types of cars, which was quite spectacular. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, it was time to go. And you had a little time card, and you had to pull up to the gate, stick your time card in, and boom, he said, I'll see you in San Diego. So we looked around at the competition. Of course, everybody thought we were completely nuts in this bright orange. I mean, we weren't even trying to not stick out. So we had this bright orange A-Team looking van, if you're familiar with that show. And actually, this van was right when that A-Team thing came out. It was built before the A-Team, but a very similar looking type of van. There was a twin turbo 930 Porsche there. There was I think a 6.9 Mercedes back then. Those Euro-spec Mercedes, Euro-spec BMWs, just some regular cars like Camaros and Firebirds and things like that. And one guy had a supercharged Camaro, and these were a couple of good old boys. I'm from Missouri, but these guys were a couple of goat ropers from I don't know where. And they had this big supercharger sticking out and a hole cut in the hood and a bottle of Jack sitting on the dashboard. And I'm thinking, are you guys seriously going to race across the country in this supercharged Camaro, drinking a bottle of Jack? And the guy had a camcorder, and back then they were about this big. So we get off at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's pouring down rain. So we've got 120 gallons of fuel in a cargo van that has the aerodynamics of a bread box. So we take off, we're about 90 miles an hour or so. And we realize that as you're going around any kind of corner at all, and I'm not talking about a corner like in a road race, I'm talking about on a major 6-lane highway, 3 lanes each direction. If you're in the fast lane and you're doing 80, 90, 100 miles an hour with that amount of weight, that was the centrifugal force would push us into the other lanes. Even if we weren't steering the van, we would be steering the other direction and would still push us. So we thought, holy cow, we probably should have tested that. And then this rain stopped. We hit the New York Turnpike, and man, hammered down, buddy, because the rain was clear, roads weren't slick. And I say we hadn't gone maybe 10, 15 miles. We pass up an unmarked state trooper. And we seen it plain as day, because as we went by him, he had all of his things going off and the lights going on. His lights came on, we pulled over. He comes walking up to the van. He looks in the window. He doesn't say a word. He's just looking at the roll cage, sticks his head in. He sees the fuel tank. We had a scanner, radar detectors. He goes, man, you boys are really wired. He goes, what place you in? And we're like, what do you mean, what place you're in? He goes, you're in that road race, ain't you? We found out later that they somehow got tipped off, and we got arrested. So did 5 other teams that ran through that same New York state. Albany, New York. I'll never forget it, because he said, you guys follow me. So luckily they didn't tow the van. We were able to drive back to the little police station And Albany, I guess at the time, was just kind of a little small town, or maybe we were on the outskirts, but it was just a little podunk police station with a couple of cells. They threw us in a cell, all three of us. They didn't say a word to us. Didn't do anything, didn't talk at all. And I think they kept us there, I don't know, it was 3-4 hours, maybe 5 hours. And then they just let us out. And I'm thinking back on this, and I'm thinking, well, we must have paid a fine at least, because we were prepared. We had bail bond cards, we had lots of cash with us. But I don't ever remember them saying, hey guys, you were doing 100+ miles an hour, and we know you're involved in an organized race, and your ass is grass. I think they just let us go, thinking that they were going to cool it all down. Well, they didn't understand the racer's mindset, because the moment we left that parking lot from that police station, we were back flooring it. And we knew that we had 4 hours to make up somehow. And we were intent on making that time up. There is no way we were going to lose the 4-ball rally. The winning time for the 1983 4-ball was 36 hours and 50-something minutes. But we didn't have any time goal. We didn't have a working speedometer. We didn't have a working odometer. We didn't have a computer. We didn't have GPS. No cell phone. You know what we did? We went to AAA and got a trip kit map. And it's got a little line in highlighter and shows you where to go. The problem is say go 10 miles and make a left turn. We didn't know what 10 miles were. Back in 1980, during this gas crisis, for some reason, they put in 85-mile-an-hour speedometers. And we knew that we were going to be past 85 miles an hour most of the whole trip. So we had to put a reducer on the speedometer gear so that we at least could see what we were doing. But of course, that threw the odometer off. We never knew how fast we were going, and we never knew how far we were going, because the speedometer was pegged on 85 miles an hour. There was no goal other than to be first. There was no way to know who anybody was. We knew nothing. And we found out later that the guy in the twin turbo 930 Porsche, which I've never even heard of a twin turbo 930, but anyway, we found out that he had gotten stopped 11 times before he got into Indiana, and they finally arrested him and impounded the car. But I'm sure this guy was probably running 150 miles an hour in this, big winged exotic car. We had no idea who or where we were running against other than this mythical finish line in San Diego. There was some exotics there. I don't recall specifically, because the only thing that's jumped out to me was that 930, because I was looking at those cars as one of my next purchases. I really don't remember. The only things I remember was the 930. I remember these guys with this supercharged Camaro with the big, air scoop hanging out, and then the Eurospec Mercedes and BMW. For some reason, that's jumped out at me, because they weren't cars you could buy in the United States per se. So we get out of jail and we, pedal to the metal. We're going to make up 4 hours of time somehow. We get into Indiana and it was dark. When I say dark, I mean it went completely dark, because we didn't know it, but the alternator had gone out. So that means we started draining the battery down, and all of a sudden our lights just started dimming to, and again, the mechanic knew exactly what was wrong. He says, Jim, we're draining the battery, alternator had to go bad. Luckily, we were right at an exit where there was a little gas station, and I'm talking about a little bitty country gas station. We come pulling into this thing, slam on the brakes, and I mean, this was like a NASCAR pit stop, because we were working on time, right? So we jumped out, pulled out the spare alternator, got his tools out, boom, 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 changed the thing in about 15 minutes. And it's hard to work on those vans because all the motor is underneath everything. Got it changed. Everybody took a quick pit stop, I believe, and boom, we jumped back on the road. So now it's it's completely dark. We had 3 sets of high-powered Micheletti driving lights on the front of the van, because back then they didn't have any kind of high-powered lights from the factory. We had the regular factory Dodge 1980 headlights. I don't even think they were halogen at the time. So we're back up to speed, flip on all 3 sets of lights, and all of a sudden we're all feeling like our heads are shaking and our eyes are flashing, and we're like, what's going on? What is happening here? And we turned the lights off and it would stop. We flipped them back on. We realized that at the speed that we were going, that the lights, which were mounted to the bumper, were fluttering up and down. So it was making a kaleidoscope on the road. We had to shut off all 3 sets of lights and drive the rest of the night with the factory high beam, which are pretty much useless. But that was it. We had no choice. We come through our hometown of St. Louis. I know it was 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Interstate 44 going on down into Oklahoma, across Texas. I expected to see like this overpass where all my friends and buddies were going to be holding up signs saying, go, go, go. Well, of course, we didn't have cell phones. Nobody knew where we were, when we were coming. So, we passed. It's completely empty. The highways are empty at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So we're just barreling. We go through Dallas, and I swear to gosh, I've never seen a traffic jam, at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night or whatever it was. I know it was a weekend. We work our way through Dallas. Everything's pretty uneventful. But by this time, your nerves are starting to take over. The fatigue, just the failures that we had, going in and out of traffic wherever possible, trying to stay alert with these 2 little lights that are out there. And I remember that my co-driver, Radical Randy, was using the blinker every time he would pass somebody. And I guess that's what you're supposed to do, right? But that click, 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 all of a sudden that started eating on me. And I finally said, gosh darn it, what the heck are you doing? Just pass these people. You don't need to signal anybody, just go past them, So I just remember that vividly because it would just bothered me, something that shouldn't bother you, and it was just wearing on my mind, and the whole time we're trying to make up this 4 hours, making up this time. We end up getting on, I think we got through New Mexico and right into either New Mexico, Arizona border, we passed a trucker, and now it was light. The guy comes over the CB radio. He says, you boys, and my best Southern accent now, he goes, you boys in that fancy van are on fire. And we're like, what? And we thought he was joking with us. We look out the window, and the ground effects rubber on the side of the van where the gas tank lines fed into the fuel lines underneath was burning fiercely because we had side exit exhaust. And what we had done, the van already had the spoilers and the flares and stuff on it, but what we did is we took this heavy rubber like you see on the side of semis on the front cabs, and we extended that all the way to the ground, all the way around the van except in the rear. No lift, right? That rubber had caught on fire, and it was burning right next to the fuel cell lines. We whipped over off the road in the middle of the desert, jumped out with the fire extinguishers. And I mean, all 3 of us jumped out because we thought the van was going to explode. Jumped out, put the fire out. Mike took a pocket knife out of his pocket and just cut a square out of the rubber. We threw it like a frisbee out into the desert, jumped back in the van, boom, held it to the floor again. So now we're going into the Rocky Mountains. We go through there. There was some kind of a storm brewing, and this was down to like a 2-lane road going through the mountains, and there was these gorges. You'd go across these bridges where the gorges were. We found out later that the wind gusts were up to 50 miles an hour. We were flying along, and I mean, the van was handling spectacularly. This thing was like a go-kart. We had put massive sway bars, gas shocks, 3-piece Enki wheels, 8-inch, 10-inch. We got some Pirelli P7 rally tires. We actually had them shipped in from Europe because you couldn't buy them in the States at the time. And this thing was tremendous. The faster you went, the better it handled. But the wind was blowing the van from lane to lane like this. I'm holding on, like for dear life. We get to the bottom of the mountain, then we're heading up towards the Laguna Mountains. We're really close to the finish line. Same thing, only this time it's raining and the wind's blowing, and my buddy Radical Randy is driving. And buddy, the adrenaline had to kick in because we knew we were about 100 miles from, we crossed the California border. And I mean, we were there, we thought. He was running this thing to the floor. We don't know how fast that was. We knew it was about 125 based on later calculations. All of a sudden, we start having some problems, start smelling this horrible smell. And it turns out the transmission overheated and blew out all the fluid. We pull over to the side of the road, and I remember this vividly. I was so scared that I jumped out of the passenger door. Mike was sleeping in the back third Recaro chair. I jumped out, all fours on the ground. And about this time, Randy comes around from the side of the van, and I looked up at him and I go, "What the hell are you trying to do? Are you trying to kill us?" And about that time, I stood up, and with the straightest face, he looked right at me and he said, "I thought this was a race. I was racing." At that point, it brought me right back to what our goal was, which was we got to win this thing. Now, in the few minutes that we were on the side of the road, the Euro spec Mercedes went flying by us, and they honked because they saw the orange van over there. And we went, we're pointing at it like, what the heck? We just lost a place. We got to get this van going. About 2 minutes later, the supercharged Camaro, the guys with the bottle of Jack, whoo, they go flying by. So we let the thing cool off a little bit. We had some spare fluid with us. We filled the transmission up with tranny fluid, held it to the pedal for 85 more miles, and crossed the finish line 9th place out of 23 teams. Could have been 7th place, but it was 9th place. It was right at 45 hours, almost even 45 hours. And we took the time that we were arrested and the little breakdown for the alternator change, the fire incident, and the transmission, and we would have done 39 hours, which was just a couple hours off of the winning time. And I thought to myself, well, that's just an excuse. It's whatever it is. You did not win. And quite frankly, we were so spent and so worn out. We had a great time at this banquet. We spent one night in Marina del Rey or whatever it was down there. I don't even know, but it was a beautiful hotel. We didn't enjoy any of it because we were all completely wiped out. And we had to get back to work. Not only did we drive from St. Louis to Boston and then Boston to San Diego, now we had to jump back in the same rig and drive it to St. Louis so we could get back to work. Never trailered it or anything. We actually got a speeding ticket on the way back. But I tell you what, it was the most spectacular feeling of doing everything you could for that long and actually making it. A lot of teams never made it. They broke down, they got arrested or whatever, or maybe they quit. I don't know what happened. And then we had a banquet afterwards with Mr. Preston. They told us some of the stories of what happened to some of the other people. I do remember there was one car there that was set up like a cop car. It was a big Crown Vic, I believe. And he had one of those rotating license plates like they do on James Bond, any of these little tricks. We had made up a cover story of to why we were driving across the country. And I had phony documents that had the Chrysler Corporation logo and their corporate address in Detroit. And it was to Fantasy Coachworks to deliver this van to the A-Team Hollywood set for a stunt sequence. And we had to be there by Monday morning at a certain time. And I had this all typed up and had it printed. And I had this document with me. And of course, I showed this to the guys back in Albany, and they just basically laughed and, threw it out. So that didn't help us at all. But we at least planned on having a little, having a little story of to what are you guys doing and why.
I'm super pumped to announce that in 2024, VINwiki is partnering with Bridgestone. So throughout the year, you're going to hear some great stories from their business, some awesome tire testing and things like that we're going to do. I've had a lot of Bridgestone and Firestone products over the years and loved them all. I know that you will too, but I want you to check out their Potenza line of tires for sports cars, supercars, and hypercars. Whatever your needs, whether it's ultimate track performance, road performance, or all-season performance, there is a Potenza tire for you. So check them out at the link in the description below and let us know what you think.